Now that was cool. All right, my name is Armand Carr. I am the host of the Quiet Storm on 102.9 KBLX, the soul of the Bay. You can't hear it? Well, somebody heard it. Shh. There we go. I know. The mic. Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. Unfortunately, the mic is not very powerful, so I need you to just shh. But right now, I want to welcome you to the Barbara Lee Elihu Harris lecture series featuring our very special guest, Mr. Danny Glover. First and foremost, I want to thank Reverend James V. Matthews of the Cathedral of Christ the Light. So please give it up for the Reverend. Also known as Father J. And we want to thank some of our sponsors, our major sponsors, Gilead Science, our Box.org, Boxer Garson Attorneys at Law, Cisco, East Bay Community Foundation, East Bay Regional Park District, IBEW Local 595, Institute for Community Leadership, Marriott, PG&E, Pandora, and DD's. I'm just playing. Some of y'all got on them DD's outfits right now. So without further ado, I want to pass the microphone to Father J. He has a couple of words. Please give it up for the Father.
Thank you. Now, normally these microphones work, and I'm going to make this one work. I'm going to make this one work, but you know, we are here, and we're here for these wonderful lectures that our Congresswoman Barbara Lee and our former mayor, Elihu Harris, has put together. And over the past 20 years, we've had an opportunity to gather as a community at very, very critical moments to really reflect upon the state of our union in this country and in the communities that we come out of. The overall overarching theme for these lecture series, and especially for this one, is chaos or community. Where do we go from here? Now, you know, Dr. King wrote that way over 50 years ago, because it is this year that we commemorate the 50th anniversary of his death. And so for just one moment, let's be mindful of Dr. King. And also in this community, I want us to remember a wonderful gentleman who meant a great deal to our community, who was the shadow of Ron Dellums for many years. And I want us also to remember our brother, Don Hopkins. Now, the committee made the mistake in asking me to share a few words. And this is my pulpit. But believe me, I'm only going to share a few words. When we think about chaos or community, do we really have a choice? Because we are living in chaos not ever seen before. And the solution is creating the beloved community that Dr. King envisioned. And I just want to leave you with what Dr. King truly said and meant about creating the beloved community. And we, sitting in this cathedral this evening, are part of that creation. And you'll understand why when you hear what Dr. King asked each and every single one of us to pursue. First and foremost, he asked us to take very, very seriously of what it means to have self-respect. He wanted us to pursue high moral standards, wanting us to engage in wholehearted work, to demonstrate real leadership. And I just have to pause for a moment to give recognition to the most wonderful leadership that we could ever have in this community, in this district, with our Congresswoman, Barbara Lee. And with all that pursuing, Dr. King said, and don't forget, that when you have that self-respect, when you embrace high moral standards, when you engage in wholehearted work, and when you demonstrate real leadership, be sure that all that you say and all that you do will have nonviolent direct action in order to pursue the beloved community. And so, my friends, without further ado, I would invite Mr. Carr to come back to introduce to us the president of Merritt College.
All right, before I do that, I would like to recognize some of the elected officials that we have present here. How you doing, Barbara? Alameda County Supervisor Court Judges Trina Thompson, Noel Wise. That's a clapping moment. City of Richmond Vice Mayor Javanka Beckles. Peralta Community College Trustee Dr. William Bill Riley. And from Supervisor Keith Carson's office, Aisha Brown. And from Alameda County, Tony Thurman. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the president of Merritt College, Dr. Elaine Burns Brown. Dr. Marie Elaine Burns. My apologies.
Good evening. On behalf of Merritt College and the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center, welcome to the third Spring 2018 lecture and the Barbara Lee and Elihu Harris lecture series. As many of you know, the series was created by the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center in partnership with Merritt College to promote the vision, leadership, and accomplishments of Congresswoman Barbara Lee and former California State Assemblyman, Oakland Mayor, and Peralta Community College District Chancellor Elihu Harris. The lecture series reminds us of our past and an effort to reinforce our memories about the struggles we've experienced and perhaps overcome. This insight is crucial to ensure that negative history is not repeated. The lectures also offer insight and strategies to assist us in proactively confronting head-on new or reframed struggles we're currently facing. During this point in time in American history, it is extremely important to expose our communities to these lectures. As the home of the Black Panthers, Merritt College promotes, inspires, and lives equity, social justice, and social change. This is the major reason we support the work and enjoy the partnership with the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center. This is also why Merritt College is excited to hear from tonight's featured speaker, renowned actor, film director, and political activist, Mr. Danny Glover. As Mr. Glover has been quoted saying, "We have to be that wedge that drives the question and asks the hard questions." Also, I'm excited to welcome Mr. Glover as we have something in common. We're both native San Franciscans. So again, on behalf of Merritt College, welcome Mr. Glover and welcome community to tonight's lecture.
All right, please give it up one more time for Dr. Marie Elaine Burns, president of Merritt College. All right, I would like to bring to the microphone now Dr. Roy Wilson, director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center.
Good evening, sisters and brothers. Father Matthews, Father Jay, thank you very much for the hospitality. It's great to be at the Cathedral of Christ of Light. Thank you, Mr. Glover, for all you do for America and for peace and justice in the world and honoring us with your presence and wisdom tonight. Congresswoman Lee and Mr. Harris, thank you for the honor of permitting the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center to produce the Barbara Lee and Elihu Harris Lecture Series. Chancellor Laguerre, the Peralta Community College District has been invaluable to the Freedom Center, and we thank you for your leadership and thank you for our partnership. Dr. Burns, it's great to be housed at Merritt College, and we feel very at home there. If you want to visit the office, we have a great identifier. We're right next to an incredible building called the Barbara Lee Science and Applied Health Center. It's a super modern, very clean, up to way beyond my understanding for the laboratories and classrooms of the technology, but it's worth coming up just to tour that building. Please do. Armand Carr, thank you so much for your work tonight as a master of ceremonies. We appreciate that. Friends and supporters, thanks for the continued support and love. We feel it, we appreciate it, and it inspires us to do more. Permit me to recognize our wonderful board of directors with our chairman, the Honorable Elihu Harris, our vice chair, Ms. Sandra Andrews, our secretary, Mr. Royal Roberts, our directors, Ms. Audrey Jones-Taylor, Carol Johnson, Dr. Bill Riley, Alton Jelks, and Michael Leidy. At the Freedom Center, we study world history, U.S. history, with a focus on the study of civil rights and the struggle for justice. We also study the science of organizing and literature with an emphasis on poetry. The students and staff of the Freedom Center asked me to leave the pulpit this evening with this message that was crafted with the assistance of a friend, a poet, Marge Piercy. We at the Freedom Center want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals nor field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. We love people who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. Thank you.
Give it up one more time for Dr. Roy Wilson. All right, so coming up to the microphone next, if I can please have Dr. Joelle LaGuire, Chancellor of the Peralta Community College District.
I am so happy to be with all of you tonight. I've already been blessed as I introduced myself to Mr. Glover. He asked me where I was from, and I stated that I was from Haiti, and then he stated that he was a Haitian at heart. So there's nothing that pleases a Haitian more than to meet other Haitians, even though they might not have been born from Haiti, because Haiti is indeed a very special place. Also a special place in our heart is the Freedom Center. I've been Chancellor at Peralta for about 3 years, and I remember the first time I was introduced to the Freedom Center. Dr. Wilson and Dr. Will Roberts came to speak with me about the center. I was very impressed with what they were sharing with me. It took me time, however, to know how special this center was. As I met the wonderful young people who participate in the programs, I immediately became a great supporter of the program. And one cold December, late December, I was invited to meet them at the place at Merritt College where they were spending the holiday season. To speak with them, to hear them was very, very, very special. At that point, I talked to Dr. Wilson and I said that we need to have more than Merritt College being a partner to this wonderful program. The whole Peralta system should be part of it. So we work together, we have a memorandum of understanding, and our support for the Freedom Center has not been just to support it, but it is something that they have earned. They have earned our respect, they have earned our support, so we are very excited to be great supporters of the Freedom Center. Most importantly, or additionally, we have become investors in the Freedom Center. My wife has had the opportunity to meet the wonderful young people, and she completely believes in them, believes in the center. And every year, we do the very best that we can to invest in the Freedom Center personally and professionally. I know there will be an appeal tonight, but I want you to know that many of us are making the appropriate sacrifice to be of personal support to the Freedom Center, and I invite you wholeheartedly to also be an investor in the Freedom Center. Thank you.
Please give it up one more time for Dr. LaGuire. All right, from the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center, we have two students that will say a little something to you, Kamia Turner and Nathaniel White. Please give it up for Kamia Turner and Nathaniel White.
Dr. King defined the last half of the 20th century as revolutionary times. Today, we live in counter-revolutionary times. Today, we are constructing a 21st century movement that resists and brings forward our struggle for justice, for peace, our struggle for civil and human rights for all. The questions today are how to best fight hate and racism, how to best fight greed and poverty, how to best fight war and violence. Dr. King teaches that nothing could be more tragic than for people to live in times of struggle and fail to achieve the attitude and the outlook that the situation demands. Dr. King says we must be curious. He teaches we must study history and the science of organizing. It is an age that defines our commitment to the common good. It's our work for justice that determines our relevancy. Let's learn from the models that put an end to slavery. What forces created a Denmark Vesey? Let's study the models that put an end to Jim Crow. What forces created a Dr. King and a Fannie Lou Hamer? It's our unity and our action that reinforces our ability to stay woke. People, stay woke.
At the Freedom Center, we study and practice the nonviolence of Dr. King. Nonviolence builds pathways to power. Now is a time to build the people power of political action. Communities where people don't vote are the same places where schools don't work. Where people don't vote are the same places where much of the gun violence happens. There are fewer jobs available in places where people don't vote. The biggest political party in America is not the Democrats or Republicans. The biggest political party in America is the I don't vote party. It is our job to change this. Voting is the first step towards political power. Freedom demands that we gain control of our government, that we gain control over an economic system that creates corporate technology dedicated to distracting us. Freedom demands we gain control over our educational system. We can change this. Keep hope alive. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Camilla. Thank you, Nathaniel. That is excellent, excellent. And can I quote a great man by the name of Kanye West? Do you guys mind? I'm just playing. I'm just playing. All right, so without further ado, I would like to introduce the Professor of Public Administration at Cal State East Bay and board member of the Freedom Center. Please give a warm round of applause for Alton Jelks.
Hello, friends. Well, I have one job to do here, and that's to try to raise some money. I've been given about 3 minutes to do it. So we're going to get right onto it. One of the strongest ways, if not the strongest ways, to support an organization is through individual contributions. Because of that, we've created the Sustaining Donor Program, and we're launching it tonight. I'm already a sustaining donor. As a board member, I'm required to donate a pretty hefty amount of money every year. And the only way I can make that work is to give some of it out on a monthly basis. So I'd like you to take a look at this card. Don't look at me. Look down at this card, okay? On one side, there's a nice photograph and a great quote. On the other side are some very interesting numbers. And what I would like, there's about 1,000 people in this room. I'd like all of you to take a moment and think, if I had to make a contribution decision tonight, based on what I see here, what would it be? How much can you afford to give on a regular basis every month? It's painless. Choose the amount that's most painless for you and makes the most contribution for the Freedom Center. It's contributions like that coming in every month that mean the bills can be paid, supplies can be bought, programs continue, and the youth that you've seen here today can continue to be given the training and the guidance and the mentoring that is so needed everywhere. So we can follow with what Dr. Laguerre was talking about in terms of each of us making a commitment. I'd like to leave here tonight with at least 25 of you signing up for this. So look at it, take out your pen, write your name, fill it in. If you've got your debit card or your check, fill that information. We'll collect it. It's very safe. As I say, I do it, and we will build from there. So we're trying to get 25 of you tonight. Actually, no. I just need 24 because I'm increasing mine by $25. See if you can match my $25 tonight by making a contribution. So take a moment, think about it, look at the card, say to yourself, yes, I can do that. If you're not ready to make that decision, please take the card with you and consider doing it as soon as you can. In the meantime, our youth will be passing the baskets about where you can make a contribution here tonight any way you'd like. If you fill out the card, go ahead and put it in the basket or wave your hand. I'll come and pick it up. So please help us launch this valuable way to support the leadership of the center and keep the monthly cash flow going. Thank you very much.
Please give it up one more time for Alton Jelks. Alton Jelks. All right, so while the students are coordinating the passing of the baskets, we have a special gift for you. We are joined this evening by Bay Area psalmist Jakari Prothro, who began singing gospel at a young age. Jakari is a proud member of the Gospel Music Workshop of America and joins us this evening with a special musical selection. Please give it up for Jakari Prothro.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I prayers we have already come. 'Twas grace that brought us safe this far, and grace will lead us home. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall walk hand in hand. Anybody believe it? We shall walk hand in hand. We shall walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, yeah, I do believe we shall walk hand in hand someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all be free someday. We shall overcome. Somebody believe in it? We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Yes, yes. Yes. Give it up one more time for Jacory. Yeah, that boy, he did the remix. That was nice. We got to do a mixtape together, brother. I got a little something. You'll never find. Ah. Won't he do it? All right, if I can please get your warm round of applause for the Honorable Elihu Harris.
Armand, thank you. Armand, thank you very much. I've got the right mic. Can you hear me? All right, I'll make sure I got the right mic. I don't sound like Armand, but I used to own a radio station. I sold it to Willie Brown, and I owned a radio station, KDIA, in Oakland. And when somebody came to buy the station, there was a woman named Kathy Hughes who owned a number of radio stations around the country. And she offered us stock and shares in her company. And Willie Brown said he was from Texas. And the only thing he knew about shares was sharecropping, and he didn't want to have anything to do with it. You know, I grew up in the 60s, and I went to a party in San Francisco and met Danny Glover. But the reason I mention that is we understood how to party, but more important than partying was keeping it real. And the next time I saw Danny Glover, he was leading student protests for ethnic studies. He was leading a protest for inclusion of diversity in faculty and staff in San Francisco. But I was going to Cal State Hayward, and we didn't have enough black folks to protest. We used to have 2 card tables, and we called it the ghetto. About 20 years or so after that, I was at an event, a Congressional Black Caucus dinner, and I was there sitting at a table with my mother, and Danny was there sitting at the same table with his father. This was a couple of years after The Color Purple had come out. And I said, Mom, this is Danny Glover and his father. She said, I don't like him. And Danny said, well, Miss Harris, you don't even know me. Why don't you like me? He said, I don't like the way you treat Whoopi. Throughout his life, while I've seen him at events and he's had parties at his home, he's always maintained a commitment to grassroots communities. No matter how many films he made, no matter how much money he made, he never forgot what he learned as a student in the 60s, and that was to keep it real. There are a lot of people who go to Los Angeles, get into movies, and they forget who they are, forget where they came from, and forgot what they're about. Danny Glover has never done that. You know, we can't afford to be in fantasy land. Because when you look at television every night, or you look at the news, you ought to understand why we don't have a choice other than to keep it real. We've got people who've forgotten how to protest. When I was the mayor of Oakland, folks would come down to City Hall every day, every night. They would jam me about homelessness. They would jam me about lack of housing. They would jam me about not having just cause evictions. I wonder what happened to y'all. Libby Child ain't seen none of you guys. I think she forgot what Oakland is really about. It's not these tall buildings. It's not gentrification. It's our neighborhoods where people live, where people raise their children, where people try to get an education, where people try to pay their rent. And the people of City Hall have forgotten why they're there. You go and remind them they're there to serve you. There's too many people down there think it's a job. It is a calling. It's public service. Whether you're in elected office, you work for the city, you got a job to do, and if you're not doing it, get the hell out. And you know it's okay to say hell in church. Because those of you who don't do what you ought to do on earth are going there. I just want to say one more thing. Just one more thing. Don't do it for yourself. Do it for your children. We no longer have jobs in factories. You can't get an 8th grade education and go work at General Motors anymore. You can't go down and get a job at the cannery or Safeway. If our children don't get an education, they're going to be moving farther than Antioch. So please, let's get organized. Let's protest at our local level. And let's sometimes not just go to send Barbara Lee to Washington. Sometimes we need to go there with her.
Yes. The Honorable Elihu Harris. That's what I'm talking about. Keep going. You're right. That's okay. We're in the house of the Lord. There will be no judgment, okay? All right, so without further ado, I would love for you to please welcome Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
First, let me say how good it is to be home. Can you hear me? And I just have to say, thank you for being the most wokest district in the country. Let me thank our president of Merritt College, Dr. Laguerre, and Dr. Marie Lane Burns, and the entire Peralta family, board trustees, also to the Martin Luther King Freedom Center, the board trustees, sponsors. Let me thank all of you. Really, this is a King family. And so I just have to thank you for staying the course, for your leadership, and really keeping hope alive for our young people. Give them all a round of applause. Really makes a big difference in the lives of this community. Also to Mayor Harris, let me thank you for your unwavering dedication to the Freedom Center and also to this great city. I think he gave us our marching orders, Elihu, so thank you so much for your continued leadership. He could be retired, but he's really not. And to, I almost said Bishop Pope, Father Jay, let me just say, thank you so much for hosting us this evening. You know, I have had the opportunity to know Father Jay since I was, I think, a student at Mills College. And I was raised in the Catholic Church, and he's still trying, but but he's my partner, and he's such a leader in this community. And also, Father Jay, I just have to say, this cathedral, and I've visited many cathedrals throughout the world, but I still think this is the most beautiful, the most awesome cathedral in the world. Isn't it gorgeous? Jacori, you know what? You've got to travel with us down south to our mass meetings. Didn't this brother sing? Doesn't he have a voice? Didn't he inspire us? And of course, Karen and Roy, thank you so much for your leadership and for your teaching and for your mentoring our young people and for keeping the center alive and well. Also, I just want to say to our students, and you heard two of them tonight, weren't they amazing? Didn't they make you proud? Gosh, thank you. And every year I have the honor of traveling with these amazing young people. They join me on the Congressional Civil Rights Pilgrimage to Selma, Birmingham, and Montgomery. But this year, we also went to Memphis, Tennessee to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. What an incredible, I'm telling you, opportunity for our young people. They actually went with us to Mason Temple, which was the church where Dr. King gave his last speech. They also had a chance to meet many of the sanitation workers who marched with Dr. King in the strike when he went to help sanitation workers fight for economic justice and better working conditions. These young people had a chance to meet these great men. They had a chance to talk to them and learn from them. So give them a round of applause because they bring back to Oakland the spirit. It's the spirit of Sankofa. You know, in the Ghanaian language, it's a bird looking back with an egg in her mouth saying, in order to move forward, we must know our past, we must know our history, we must know where we came from. That way we can move forward. And these young people remind me of Sankofa because they are just tremendous. They're our leaders. I won't even say our future leaders. They're leading now. So congratulations to all of our kids. And I am so pleased and excited to have my dear friend here tonight to really put his work in perspective. And let me just tell you a little bit about Danny and remind you of more of who he is, where Elihu left off. First of all, yes, he's a Bay Area native, but he has been a fierce advocate in representing and moving the diaspora agenda forward. While attending San Francisco State University, Danny joined the Black Student Union and worked on some very pivotal issues. Thanks to his advocacy, along with many others, the Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front, they were instrumental in the creation of a Black Studies program and School of Ethnic Studies at now San Francisco State University. He did that, a trailblazer. This was way back in the day. And of course, the administration at the time resisted, but through a 5-month strike, mind you, 5 months, Danny and his friends succeeded in this important work. He embodies the ideals of where do we go from here, chaos our community, because he also understands resistance and protest and what that means in the context of change. Elihu mentioned the Congressional Black Caucus dinner. Well, yes, Elihu and his dear mother, they were there that night. Danny and his handsome dad were there. And I was also at that table with my beloved mother. And let me tell you, my mother had a crush on Danny's dad. That lasted a long time. Danny is a speaker, he's an actor, he's an activist and humanitarian. Let me tell you, he also is, I call him people's lobbyist, because Danny Glover walks the halls of Congress on our behalf, educating members of Congress about justice and peace and environmental issues, you name it. He reminds these members, my colleagues, that we have to think globally and act locally. Every time I look up, there Danny is, in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, pushing forth our people's agenda. So I have to thank Danny for that because you're making a major difference in the body politic. Now, also, you know, his first film debut was in Places in the Heart. That was 1984. The Color Purple, of course, is a film we all know and love that showcased and propelled Danny's acting skills onto the national stage. You also may remember Danny in his amazing role in Lethal Weapon, and now in his new movie, which I haven't seen yet, but it's called Sorry to Bother You. So let's all make sure we go see Sorry to Bother You, Danny. We will do that. Within the last 2 decades, Danny has gone on to serve as a goodwill ambassador to the United Nations Development Program and as a UNICEF ambassador. Now, many of you know I represent the House of Representatives, the Democrats, at the United Nations. And so in serving in my capacity as the congressional rep to the UN, I have personally worked with Danny as we highlight, and he'll probably talk a little bit about this tonight, the International Decade for People of African Descent. He knows firsthand the challenges of our community, both global and domestic. He knows what we're experiencing as the racial income gap widens and as communities of color fall deeper into poverty. Danny's on the front line in the fight for economic justice, environmental justice, and racial justice. And I have to tell you, he is well positioned to continue to speak not only to our issues, but to our path forward. Today, where do we go from here? Chaos our community, we're moving forward. If we're to protect our hard-fought progress, our voices must be heard. And so tonight we have to honor to listen to a man who is so passionate about so many different issues, empowering youth, supporting the arts and education, as well as global human rights. And Danny Glover is changing the world. So I invite you now to open your minds, listen to his words of wisdom. There's much to learn from a man who has dedicated his entire life to addressing the real problems and creating real change in our communities. Danny, welcome to the wokest congressional district in the country, and you know Wakanda forever, okay, Danny? That's where you are. Okay, give him our Wakanda forever.
I have a difficult time knowing where to start and how to start right now. But it's so, I'm sorry, which one is it? There we go. I just simply, Chinua Achebe, things fall apart. Okay. All right, do I touch it? I can move it here. I said that it's extraordinary because I almost don't know how to start or where to start. I'm immensely thankful that I'm here this evening. And more than just thankful, humbled as well. I'm humbled by the fact that there, as I look across this audience, there are people who were in this audience who've come across my life over the last 50 years and every different moments in that 50 years. And there are too many in this audience to name. And that makes it so humbling in some sort of ways. Because at the same time, you know that these people and the many other citizens here who have been always on arm, always there, all these citizens who have been through that, it feels like I'm standing here and preaching to the choir. But Dr. King always said you got to preach to the choir, but they may decide to stop singing. But more different from that, I'm also thinking at the same time that I'm speaking to the choir of my life as I sit here. And this makes it different than speaking at some other venue away from the place that you've lived simply the majority of your life and you love. San Francisco, Bay Area, Oakland, Berkeley, yes, you love. And so you're speaking and you're talking in a way different than you would talk if you were in Duluth, Minnesota, giving a speech, or someplace like that. And you don't know anybody, and they don't know, they can't say to you, you remember that day we were out on campus doing the strike, and they had the mass bus, and you said, yeah, I was one of the ones that busted too. We all were. So to have that as a part of the context of speaking here today makes it interesting and in some sense just lovely and beautiful. So thank you for that. And I think I better enter into my prepared remarks because I'm in up doing that second speech that I have prepared in my mind as I was watching every single person who came up here and introduced this evening. I can't thank you enough. I think we need to give every one of them a hand of applause. I want to especially thank my friend and sister, Barbara Lee, the Martin Luther King Jr. Center and the Peralta College, Community College District for inviting me to participate in this lecture series. As public servants, you've dedicated your careers, your professional lives to serving the public. Good. Just as Elihu Harris and Congresswoman Barbara Lee have made an impact not only on their respective communities, but also in this state, the nation, and the world. You too are engaged in this struggle for peace and justice. In the 50 years since Dr. Martin Luther King was taken from us, his words have not just been relevant, but profound, especially his timeless book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. But at our central place in history, Dr. King's words are prophetic as well, still retaining their full ability to speak life to us in our moments, especially when we don't sugarcoat them. In all honesty, we already know the answer to Dr. King's most profound question. We know that our most sincere desire and demand is for community. We know that we will need to create a culture of radical engagement and sustainable activism to achieve it. What we struggle with is how to make that community and the activism that we construct a reality. Today we face a tangled web of challenges that all work together to maintain the status quo in the process obscure the root causes of our oppression. When multiple forms of oppression coordinate, the world appears chaotic to the marginalized. Climate change threatens every life on the planet, yet climate change denial still pays off politically because those who feel its immediate effects are black and brown people. In the so-called developing world, but there are water shortages in Cape Town and toxic water in Flint, Michigan. South Africa's are destabilized, it's destabilizing communities all over the world. Catastrophic weather conditions brought by climate change can also serve as a theater in which our society's deepest prejudices are acted upon. How else can we describe the American government's treatment of the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria less than a year ago? The effects of climate change and resource shortages in this instance, the effects of this enabled the effects of racism. But should we prioritize environmental activism or over anti-racist work? Gentrification is another form of disenfranchisement that is even interwoven with other forms of marginalization. Community members are priced out of their homes and away from the center of political engagement and participation as affordable housing and gainful employment dwindles. But how do we discern the real impact? Let's take Oakland as an example. How do the economic changes happening in San Francisco drive the gentrification of West Oakland and the loss of affordable housing and jobs in downtown Oakland? For those who are financially vulnerable, what are the long-term effects of blue-collar and middle-class residents being pushed away from the center of political gravity in the Bay Area? If real estate developers and their political allies are the primary strategic decision makers guiding the evolution of cities, what does that mean for working class people and those who are unemployed, underemployed? What about those who work and don't have a living wage as well? Oakland's living wage is estimated at $50 an hour, but the average Oakland resident only makes $20 an hour. Lower income households are disproportionately impacted by housing costs. With nearly 80% of Oakland's lowest income households costs, there's 36% of this being African American households and families with children. And where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Dr. King wrote, dignity is also corroded by poverty. No matter how poetically we invest the humble with simple graces and charm, no worker can maintain his morale or sustain his spirit if in the marketplace his capacity are declared to be worthless to society. Am I too close? I'm sorry. These words speak to the income and labor issues of our present situation, and they should energize us in campaigning for workers' rights. Ultimately, a fair living wage is not our ultimate goal. The dignity that a fair living wage brings is, deep down in our hearts of hearts, we have always known that dignity and justice are what we seek. But it can still seem that our movements have veered off track, that we have struggled to build and sustain authentic communities and have instead depended on a superficial engagement with Dr. King's most profound ideas. Scholars often talk about something called the resource curse to explain how certain countries that are rich in natural resources, diamonds, gold, cobalt, magnesium, and of the curse, silicon, and of course silicon, are unable to translate their riches into economic growth and political stability, because their economies are so dependent upon these resources. Control of them means absolute power, and wide fluctuations in the price of these resources encourages those who control them to pursue profits at all costs. Usually the resource curse is used to describe countries like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where a brutal civil war has resulted in millions of deaths as factions fight for control of the country's mineral resource deposits. Many of the same minerals like silicon that go into computers, smartphones, and other electronics. Although the Oakland area has seen catastrophic violence like the Democratic Republic of Ghana has, or our housing crisis is connected to profitability of resources being stripped from the country, that country. As we all consume technology to become more interconnected with one another, we are disconnecting ourselves from the reality of our consumption. In that way, our struggles in increasing income inequality and the widening wealth gap, days before his untimely assassination, Dr. King was in Memphis, Tennessee, supporting sanitation workers in their struggle to form a union that would demand higher wages and safer working conditions. He was also meeting simultaneously with sharecroppers and other unemployed workers in Mississippi and Alabama to discuss the realization of a national multi-racial poor people's march. He knew in order for the war on poverty to be sustainable and effective, the voices of those citizens most impacted by public policy were essential. He understood that justice would require not only demands, but also their presence. He also understood that the intersection of economic justice, police brutality, official accountability, and mass incarceration, he understood the relationship that public social spending had lifting people out of poverty. And that poverty itself was a political choice made by policy setters, not the impoverished themselves. The work we must do is restorative work. But how do we do it? We have to break out of our comfort zone and restore our presence in other movements. We have to preserve our passion, our fire, our motivation by thinking critically, but also constructively. We cannot mistake electoral outcomes with the people of this country gaining or losing power or progress toward justice. We have to know how to define power and justice. Dr. King tells us power is at its best love implemented in the demands of justice, and justice as its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. Love is about relating to one another. For our movements, this means in renewing focus on intersectionality, not as an exercise in stacking up identities or oppressions to outserve some another one person or something like that. But how do you build stronger networks based on our innate human ability to understand and empathize with one another? We cannot afford to be single issue advocates. It's all or nothing. When we work for diversity, we have to demonstrate what that diversity looks like, sounds like, moves like, smells like our movements. Divides between activists and public officials are opportunities for collaboration. We need to put some real thought into the ways in which we can collaborate in new ways. We have to be careful as well. Economic inequality is incredibly profitable. In Brazil, where the top 1% owns half of all the country's lands, leaders like Lula da Silva have made it the mission to radicalize and reduce inequality. However, the wealthy interests have retaliated by unseating and removing his successor from office and plunging the country into economic and political crisis, while Brazil's wealthy remain untouched. We have to use and protect the tools at our disposal. There are many aspects of contemporary life that are consistent with sustainable activism and community. Our young activists have innovated through the use of crowd outsourcing. They were born into an activist culture centered on intersectionality and often the default of thinking about social issues as interconnected. Social media and vital content have opened up new mechanisms for communication and collaboration, but have also restored new vulnerabilities as well. To move irreversibly forward, our focus has to be on building communities within and among our movements, in chaos or communities. King noted, we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We have confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is no such thing as being too late. There is a such thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked and dejected with lost opportunity. This may well be mankind's last chance to choose between chaos or community. We have to take the next steps. Dr. King's work showed us the power of being unafraid to advocate for truth, plural truth. Dr. King was unafraid to reach across the country's most treacherous divides: race, class, gender, sexual orientation, and religion, to build relationships that gave rise to coalitions, from working alongside white activists, to drawing on spiritual teachings, and to collaborate with LGBT illuminates such as Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin. Dr. King showed us that differences need not be limitations on informing civic relationships, especially when those relationships are rooted in a sincere regard for truth and justice. The truth can free us, but it cannot defend itself. Under unity, it's not just about coming together. It's about sticking together. It's not only about consensus, it's about cohesion. It's simply not enough for us to share ideals without practicalities, to speak the language of resistance without fully thinking through being an activist, a leader, an organizer, or just a thoughtfully engaged citizen demands of us. Dr. King saw himself as a part of a movement, not the movement. We can remember him as a hero, but not a superhero. Everything he did was firmly within the realm of human ability, and everything he dreamed for us was within the realm of human possibility. Through radical engagement, we must not only tell powerful stories about the experiences we share, but also raise and reflecting on the basic question of where we are, who we are meant to be, and where do we go from here. Radical engagement demands a revolution, not a violent upheaval. Revolutions are evolutions too. Revolution has many meanings. On our earth is in a revolution around the sun right now. Just as our movements evolve, they must also resolve. They resolve around ideas, but what ideas will our movements revolve around tomorrow? What does it mean for movements to revolve around gentrification, displacement, around global climate change, around labor, around police accountability, around economic inclusiveness and economic justice, not only here in the United States, but around the world in the black and brown countries that support our lifestyles. It means changing our orbits. It means reaching out and educating ourselves about the topics we avoid. It means talking to the people we don't understand. It means understanding that movements about the same issues will look different from a different place. This is a season for midterms, a season for the beginning of this electoral cycle. What can we do and how can we work to elect those who make determinations in our lives, whose responsibility is for the public good? How can we vote those people into office who believe it, who live it, and who fight for it? Thank you so much. I really, beautiful voice. I tell you what, to me, it is, once again, I can't repeat how wonderful it is to be here with you. And secondly, you know, I want to thank everyone, this community and the communities that I know best here in this area, but all the communities, for all the work that we know we must do, for what we must lay the ground for finding and nurturing and laughing and loving that new leadership. To let them fly, that new leadership with new ideas. That's what the King knew, and that's what he blessed us with, that memory as well.
No, I'm okay. No. Okay, we're going to have a little dialogue for just about 10 minutes with Danny. And let me just take a minute. Danny, first of all, I introduced you as a brilliant leader, an activist, an actor, but also now I have to say you are a philosopher, a teacher.